and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where we dive deep into regional headlines and speak with leading policymakers and business leaders. I am Katie Jensen. Saudi Arabia has taken centre stage in global diplomacy this week, brokering high-level talks between Russia and the US, an unprecedented move that has left the world watching closely. Today we speak with Dr Abdulaziz Sager, the chairman of the Gulf Research Centre, to examine the significance of these pivotal talks, Saudi Arabia's growing influence on the global stage, and whether the Arab League's next move could change the future of Gaza forever. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us today on Frankly Speaking. Now, Saudi Arabia was all over the headlines this week when it facilitated the discussions between the US and Russia. Now, of course, this is something that would have seemed unimaginable to many people, even just a few short months ago. So, frankly speaking, were you surprised? And what were the real outcome of these discussions?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me today with you. And I think it's a pleasure to participate in your program. Well, Saudi Arabia have taken an important position that have led to this meeting, which means Saudi Arabia originally refused to take a side, neither with the Russian nor with the Ukrainian. So, in fact, they took a position that they vote in the UN for the decision against the Russian invasion of Ukraine. With the GCC country, they have taken also a very firm and clear position on that subject also. They have contributed to the humanitarian issue in Ukraine. They have participated on the release of some of the prisoner, also Ukrainian prisoner from the Russian side. And also they have insisted, and this was stated during the visit of the foreign minister, Saudi foreign minister to Ukraine, by saying, confirming the position of Saudi Arabia on the unity of Ukraine. But yet they never wanted to be fully on the side of the either or, what the American and the European country, the number of countries that they put together, and either you are with us or against us. So they have maintained the relation with Russia. They never wanted to cut the relation diplomatically with Russia, because Russia has been a very important and useful partner on the OPEC Plus. Because of that position, and because of our position with the US, that, this year, this February, we are celebrating the 80th anniversary of the Saudi-American relation. We did not change our position. Sometimes there is a little changes in the US position, but we have maintained our good and strong alliances and relationship. So they saw that Saudi Arabia is the best platform and the best convenient for such a meeting. That meeting was a very important meeting that took place in Riyadh, attended by both State Secretary or Foreign Minister and with the National Security Advisor, and have brought the two together since many years, where they did not get together, and also to discuss the current situation. And the result of that one, of course, is to create a different committee between both sides to go in depth and in detailed discussion of the whole issue. There is a political dimension there. There is a military side. There is a security also issue. There is an economical reconstruction. There is also social issue and humanitarian. So there are plenty of issues need to be looked in depth after.
Sure. So let's talk about some of those issues, because we saw the work that Saudi did to facilitate these discussions, but certainly one party who was absent from the meeting was Ukraine. Now, I understand there were other topics discussed outside of Ukraine, but don't you think there should have been some form of Ukrainian presence at the meeting? And then secondly, what were some of the other discussion points that were a big focus there?
Well, definitely, Ukraine will participate, and I think it was clearly stated by the US side. There will be participation from the Ukrainian side.
Do you think it was a missed opportunity they didn't participate in this meeting, though, Doctor?
No, I think Zelensky, he's aware of the discussion, and I think there has been a meeting also after this in Paris, attended by a different European foreign minister, and has been notified. But also, as you mentioned quite clearly, I just focus on the subject of Ukraine. There must have been other issues also, which is related to the Russian-America relation. More than $300 billion of Russian money has been frozen. There is a sanction on the Russian. And I saw a bit of a news today, which I can't confirm it, but at least it was a good news for many Russians to look at it, which is they're allowed to go back and use their credit card, MasterCard and Visa, and the other, which was also stopped, as part of the sanction. But I think it will move forward because President Trump is very keen in ending any sort of military conflict and try to bring solutions to the different conflicts that he's looking at it.
Well, a few days ago, we saw President Trump thank Saudi Arabia for their diplomatic efforts in overseeing these discussions between the US and Russia. Now, we know President Trump is expected to visit Saudi very soon. Tell me, Doctor, do you think that President Trump will consult with Saudi Arabia on the matter of Gaza? And in your opinion, what would a successful outcome there look like?
Saudi position never changed. Saudi position is still insisting in the two-state solution. If you have other solution, tell us. The solution that President Trump presented is non-acceptable. The deportee of the people of Gaza, and then converting it to a real estate project, and then there is no guarantee that they will be back. I don't think this is acceptable. And by the way, not only Saudi Arabia, collectively the whole GCC country with Egypt and Jordan are rejecting such a thing. I think he wanted to divert the tension from the two-state solution, that he will put the countries in the region here in a defensive position to defend themselves from not really getting to the two-state solution that they've always believed in that one. But also at the same time, if they have other solution, let them present it, because the one that they presented by deporting the Gaza people and converting it into a Rivera, as he called it, or whatever project, that's not going to work, and will not be acceptable. At the same time, my own personal feeling, when you escalate the level of demand that you wanted, from the other side, normally because you wanted to reach a sort of a compromise. I mean, today I was listening to the president of Iran when he said, America policy did put us under a lot of severe pressure. We're willing to discuss with the Americans. So maximum pressure have resulted to such a statement. What Trump is aiming for when he talk about the deportee and getting the people of Gaza out is to avoid two things. One, the two-state solution, he wanted to keep it aside. And the second, he wanted to have a collective and a group recognition and normalization with the Israeli. And I don't think that will happen, because the Saudi Arabia leading the team, and you remember we had the Arab and Islamic Summit in Riyadh here, and that summit did confirm with the 57 country attending that is the two-state solution. That's the way forward that we will be accepting. And so far, there is 149 countries in the world, and as a member of the UN, have recognized the Palestinian state, and the rest, there is a progress every day. He did not recognize the Saudi effort that has been put with their other country, touring the world from China all the way to Washington, from Washington to Europe and to some of the African country, in trying to get a consensus with regard to the Palestinian Authority membership at the UN.
Okay, so you say that President Trump is waiting for the Arab nations to present their own counter-offer. Now, as we know, Saudi Arabia is hosting the leaders of 4 Arab countries to present their own plan for Gaza's reconstruction, whilst also ensuring that the Palestinians are able to remain on their land. Doctor, looking back, do you think that these regional partners were caught unprepared by the surprises that the US presidential election sprung?
Definitely, they were very surprised with the way because President Biden and his team at that time, they did talk about the two-state solution. It was in their agenda. But here, and even by the way, when you look at the popularity of Netanyahu in Israel today, it's going extremely down. And the Israeli themselves, what they are saying today, and a lot of them, I've heard it from different sources, they're saying that he couldn't achieve the release of the prisoner by the war machine. He had to go back to political discussion and negotiation to try to release those Israeli prisoners.
So,
that
Doctor,
means
if I can understand, you're admitting that the Arab leaders were surprised by the outcome of the US presidential election. What's happened? Do you think that the leaders were unprepared for what would happen?
Well, they were unprepared for such a proposal by President Trump, but they were prepared to move toward a two-state solution. And with regard to the reconstruction, by the way, I think they are not in agreement with those whom they say they have to leave to be able to work on the side. I think Germany was totally destroyed during the Second World War, and close to 9.5 million, they were, dead in that war. But yet, the U.S. created the martial law and the fund, and did contribute to reconstruct Germany without throwing the German outside the country.
So when we focus on the Arab position, we know that substantive and logistical preparations are underway for what is set to be an extraordinary Arab League meeting on Gaza that will be hosted by Egypt on March the 4th. Do you expect the meeting to call on Hamas to hand over power to the Palestinian Authority as that first unifying step on a path to a two-state solution?
Definitely, the Arab countries and the Arab League will ask for a unified Palestinian position, a unified Palestinian Authority. And Hamas, they don't have to have their own members, which will be rejected because they are on the terrorist list worldwide with some of many countries, but they can get some closer people to them, to be represented in the Palestinian Authority, and then and also try to manage the situation from that one. But definitely the Arab country, there's two issues there. One, always the Israeli accuse the Arab countries and the Palestinian that you do not have a unified position. This is why Hamas and Jihad are different than the Palestinian Authority. And here the Arab country will try to put a pressure by having a unified position between all the Palestinians to speak with one voice, with one demand, with one things. And then, as I said, people whom they are close to Hamas and Jihad can participate in that one, not necessarily full member of Hamas and Jihad.
And I think you make an important point there, but we know as of today, the ceasefire in Gaza is holding. We're seeing Israeli hostages being released in exchange for the Palestinian prisoners. And all of this is taking place despite President Trump's threat to Hamas to release all the Israeli hostages, or that all hell is going to break loose. So, Doctor, do you think that Hamas or even the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu really takes Mr. Trump's rhetoric seriously?
Well, I think neither Hamas can get rid of the Israeli, nor the Israeli can get rid of the Gaza people. There's 2.5 million people there. They cannot, unless they throw a nuclear bomb, and that will have an impact on them. So there is nobody, none of the side can get rid of the other. So it means they have to, believe in coexistence and to do. But at the same time, I think the Palestinian has the right of self-determination, which is the same basis the 1948 law that allowed the Israeli state to be established. So I think if we go back to that law, the right of self-determination, and the Palestinian then will have the right to determine whether they want to be part of one state and with the full right, or they would like to go into a two-state solution.
Sure, but do you see either sides taking Mr. Trump's comments seriously? Again, in the last week, we heard him say that all of the Israeli hostages must be released, or he's had big threats.
Yeah, I heard that.
Do you think that they are taking him seriously, or do you think they see it as a lot of hot air?
Well, we are used to now from President Trump to escalate his demand, but not necessarily when it comes to implementation, that he used it as a compromises. And I think the Palestinian, the Hamas did get the message, but yet they did insist to stick to the plan that was agreed. And this is, by Saturday, we are getting toward the end of the first phase of the plan.
And I think we saw in President Trump's first term, when he negotiated with the Taliban over the heads of the Afghani government, that he does follow through on a lot of these threats. And we saw the resulting catastrophe. And I think it's concerning with what we're looking at today. But let me ask you a slightly different question. Now, when we look at some of the legal cases going on internationally, we've seen the ICC's arrest warrants against a number of Israeli leaders. There's also South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the ICJ. Now, they have drawn really the wrath of Republicans in Congress, as well as some tough sanctions from the Trump administration. So in light of that, do you think these cases are worth pursuing, regardless, for the sake of justice and for deterring war crimes in the future?
I think it's worth to pursue, because in the end we need to respect the international law and we need to respect the international court, and such an effort has been put by the South African country is highly appreciated. And remember, this year the G7 meeting in 2026 will take place in South Africa. So that effort has been appreciated, and I think that matter should continue, because we should not give a chance for the genocider and those whom they commit such a crime to get away with it without getting to the court and getting to the legal side. Yes.
So, Doctor, in light of all of that, compared to this time last year, are you more optimistic about the Middle East in the wake of a number of developments we've seen in places like Syria and Lebanon? We've seen successful ceasefires and hostage exchanges taking place in Gaza, as well as Iran's tacit acknowledgement that they are a vastly diminished regional power going forward. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yes, there are many cases still open. We almost have 7 countries in a failing state almost situation in the Arab world. We have Yemen, Sudan, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Libya. All of those are under, and Gaza, of course, the Palestinian side. So all of those, there is a huge demand for the reconstruction, which can cost trillions. And so today there was a report on Syria saying the Syrian economy, if everything goes well, by 2080 will be stabilized. I think a big challenge will be is first how to reconstruct the human being, those people whom they have lived during this time of crisis and war, and second, how to go in a proper roadmap with international collaboration, whether from the UN and the different program of the UN, and also trying to get a real effort, to do the whole reconstruction and the political structure, law and order, constitutional issues, many of those. So they need a lot of hard work. I think I'm optimistic that we will see less war, unless maybe military attack at this stage, unless if the Israeli go into a full confrontation with the Iranian, that's another issue. But as long as the Iranian is willing to sit and negotiate with the US and compromise, because the Iranian issue, there are 3. One is their interventionist policy in the region, which has been trimmed now and through using their arms and tools in the region to Iraq and Yemen. And I'm sure now the lesson is learned there after, Gaza and Lebanon and Syria. At the same time, the militarization of their nuclear program and the maritime security issue, which is quite important, that have led to almost in 2024 losses on the Red Sea because of the Bab el-Mandab, more than $50 billion there. So I think they understand that and they see it, and their choices will be, it's either they come forward and try to accept peace in the region and stop their intervention or so, or that may lead to a real military confrontation between them and the Israeli with the full support of the American.
So given quite an uneven recovery in different parts of the region, Doctor, are you feeling more optimistic or less optimistic than where we were last year?
Well, my sort of nature, I'm always optimistic. This is why we look at life. But also with optimism, with cautious optimism, I see that there is a lot of hard work need to be done, to overcome a lot of those issues, as I said, whether it's humanitarian or reconstruction or stabilization or de-escalation, the international different players, negotiation. Look at today, for instance, how the European looking at the American Russian negotiation. They feel they have been marginalized and compromised.
So when we talk about some of those challenges, you mentioned the reconstruction, not only of places like Syria, but also Gaza as well. Tell me, in light of the reconstruction efforts, were you surprised by President Trump's comments about turning Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East? Were you shocked? Do you think that was hot air? Was it a negotiation tactic or simply a way to try and get a counter offer by the Arab nations?
I think it is a negotiation tactic. He escalated, giving his background and his knowledge on the real estate development, that's an issue. But at the same time, I think it's a negotiation tactic by escalating his demand and his vision. So then he put the rest in this defensive position and then use it as a leverage that, if you look at the whole week, last week, most of the Arab media, they were trying to deal with the issue of the deportee and the displacement of the Gaza people instead of talking about the two-state solution. So he wanted to use that as a leverage to offside the two-state solution.
Absolutely, and I think his plans to relocate or displace more than the 2 million Palestinians who live in the Gaza Strip, I think is something that shocked not only Arab nations, but I really think around the world. Tell me, as we look towards the future, how do you think the future of Gaza will look? Will there be a role for Hamas, the PA, or Arab peacekeeping forces?
I think there could be some sort of integration of people close to Hamas, as I said, within the Palestinian Authority. I think the Palestinian Authority will have a lot of endorsement and support by the Arab country to have, ruling, administrating, I would say, because if you look at what is the Israeli demand in Gaza, it's very clear. They want the demilitarization of Gaza. They want a friendly administration to manage Gaza because of the neighborhood issues, and they want the release of their prisoner, and also they want the Hamas militant group and leaders to leave Gaza.
With such an extreme right-wing government that we see in Israel today, more so than ever, do you feel like there's any hope for Palestinians?
Well, the Palestinians have shown a great resistant capability, and they have dealt with a lot of these things. No matter how hardline, how further can you go in this hard line, the Palestinians will not leave their land and will not go out. And we would expect the U.S. to play a much better role of mediation because they do have an important representative in sitting in Tel Aviv with the good military capability, managing the relation between and reflecting the U.S. Between both sides, the Palestinian and the Israeli.
Okay, so you feel the US needs to do a better job at mediating.
Oh, yes.
Tell me, with
And they can. And honestly, they are the only one who has the big leverage that they can use it against the Israeli to push for a peace, because we will endorse, peace, and we would endorse a viable Palestinian state, of course, and a two-state solution. This is what we have presented. If they have other solution, let them come up with it.
Of course, now with normalization off the table, what leverage does Saudi Arabia have over Israel today?
Well, on the normalization, I think Saudi remains very clear in their position. They have stated it and re-emphasizing it also after the President Trump, initiative, or his suggesting that for the first time the Saudi Foreign Ministry within 3 or 4 hours they have responded to that by totally rejecting anything like this. I think there will be no normalization without having a viable Palestinian state.
We will see. Of course, there's been the big meeting this weekend, and I think all eyes will be on March 4th for that rather extraordinary meeting between the Arab League to see if we can try and find a proper resolution from the Arab states. Well, Doctor, thank you very much for your time today on Frankly Speaking. We really appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Thank you. All the best.